All right. Welcome in, everybody. Today we're going to talk about maturity and your lack of it. I've got my Muppet mug. Do you have yours? Have you considered? You should consider. It's very important. Good stuff. And I've got two different types of medicinal tea. Polly has decided to join me, and let's read from our sacred tome, Taleb's book of aphorisms. I will go to a random location. This always works out so well, it's insane. Let's see. Suckers think that you cure greed with money, addiction with substances, expert problems with experts, banking with bankers, economics with economists, and debt crisis with debt spending. Well, he's not wrong. And why do they believe that? Because they're not mature. It has been another wild week. Lots of weirdness going on as usual. A lot of people not understanding the world. And 0% surprising to me, of course, but these things happen. The real question is, what's going on in the world, right? Like, what's happening? Why is everything so strange? It's a valid question. Why is everything so strange? I don't know. But things are so strange. And so we have to kind of figure out why. Well, a lot of it boils down to maturity or the lack thereof. A lot of the stuff that I'm seeing lately is people not understanding sophistication, people not understanding how to take things seriously, people being confused about inside words and outside words, for example. And you may have noticed I finally got my animation out. Thank you, Castle. He did a wonderful job. And Sarah, of course, edited everything together and made it work. And it looks gorgeous. We've got some comments on that video. It's one of the more popular videos now, which is nice. The limits of our perspective are something we don't understand unless we're mature. And we're going through a lot of people not understanding the limits of their perspective. And that's very much what that video was about. I realized, sort of based on one of the comments later, that I could have added to it, but I'm of two minds on that now. I'm like, if you don't understand this, anyway. Yeah, try to make things simple, and somebody's there to mess them up. So let's jump into maturity. I think the issue here is that we don't have a good definition. So let's start, as I sometimes do, with etymology. So it's basically ripened, fully developed. And then later, this is in reference to fruit, right? And this is all 14s and 1500s. For some reason, all of these crazy words that we use come from the same time period that might be important. Fully developed powers of body and mind. So first is fruits and vegetables, is freaking plants. And then all of a sudden they're applying it to people. So a differentiable object that has its own discernible properties and qualities in the world. That's how I'm going to cut that apart on the scientific side, because scientists suck at sciencing, actually. So I just do a better job. It's not my fault. You want to be independent from the plant or the thing that bore you, the thing from which you fruit, but now subject to the world. And so maturity is that careful balance between developing under the protection of something and then being subjected to the world. I think if you think of it that way, that's kind of best way to deal with it. And again, this is this crazy trend of applying science words about nature to beings that are made in the image of the ineffable creator of all things. I don't know why you would do such a thing, but that is the world into which we have been torturously born. Wasn't always that way. And it's gotten worse recently. But that trend goes all the way back to the 1500s for some weird, indiscernible, unless you know any history, reason. So we talk about maturity in a couple of different ways. We talk about physical maturity, we talk about mental or emotional maturity, and we treat these as separate items, which is very strange because you can't do that in the plant world. Mm, mm. So they're very much separate items to us in the realm of the person. And when your physical doesn't correspond to your mental maturity, we notice because the emotional state is related to the coherence of the person, and the physical is all we have to look at. So, how do you judge how mature a person should be? Well, you got to look at their physique. You don't have much of a choice. I went to school once with a guy named David. It's very funny. He was about as big as Goliath. He was huge. He was 6'1", man, and we were not in high school. We were not in junior high. This kid was enormous. The reason why I remember David, he's a super nice guy. But the big reason why I remember him is because there was snow in the schoolyard, and he grabbed some snow, cocked his hand back to throw it, and when he cocked his hand back, he knocked me out because I was standing next to him or something, probably in a foolish place. Entirely my fault. But he felt bad. He's like, "Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god." I'm like, "Don't worry about it. It's fine." But he was a big kid. He was also fairly mentally mature, we'll say. And that was, that was rather nice, right? So it's good to know that these things are separate, right? That we do separate them and that we notice when they don't correspond correctly. And how right we are, how wrong we are, whatever. I mean, this is where subjectivity begins and so-called objectivity, if such a thing exists, ends. Right? Not important. It's not interesting. But it that's the way of the world. Like, okay, we can tell these two things apart. We have expectations around them. Our expectations are going to vary slightly. It's fine. You'll be fine. Get over it. Don't get all philosophical on me. The thing is, if someone isn't mature, however, they won't handle the world well, no matter how physically capable they may be of handling the world or any given situation. They won't feel a part of the world, and therefore they won't act a part of the world. It will always be something that they are physically manifesting discomfort with. Now, that's not a lack of what we perceive as physical maturity. This is going to go to the deeper point of maturity. They won't feel a part of the world. They will be upset by and at the world. They won't understand what is happening in the world as something that should happen in the world. Problem with that is that if it's happening in the world, it's part of the world and you need to deal with it. You can't say, "Oh, that's unfair. I don't like it." I mean, it's kind of immature, don't you think? And yet we're living in a world where this is happening constantly. Why? I don't know. Seems like we have a bunch of immature people around us everywhere. And it's hard for us to describe what maturity looks like in the world. And fair enough. It's hard to describe what maturity looks like. So let's talk a little bit about what maturity isn't. Maturity has nothing to do with knowledge. It has nothing to do with what you know or with this mysterious wisdom thing that everybody's talking about. It has nothing at all to do with those things. I can prove this pretty easily. Children are often wise, but they're not mature. And you can go back and say, yeah, but Mark, you said there's mental maturity and physical. Children are not mentally mature either. That's why they're children, right? They don't have the world exposure, much less the world experience. And those are two different things. That's going to help you if you understand that. To be mature. And you can talk about precociousness and early maturation and all these things. Not helpful. So, of course, then, maturity has nothing to do with education or learning or teaching or training. Subjects that I have covered in videos elsewhere on my channel. It cannot be taught to people. You cannot teach people to mature, right? Now, these things are correlated, of course, right? But that is not the same thing at all. Most mature people have a greater capacity for learning. That capacity comes from the maturation, not the other way around. The world is not symmetrical. You cannot teach or train or educate people into being more mature. That is ridiculous. The maturity comes through the experience of the world. But experience by itself does not convey maturity, especially if you have no control over your emotional state. If you don't control your emotions, you're not going to mature. You're not going to be mature. I think that's where people get confused. When people who are immature are quiet, they seem mature because they seem in control. But when they get emotionally wrangled, their immaturity comes screaming out. Actually, I remember once I was hanging out, this is many, many years ago. I was a child. I was probably 17. I was hanging out at the GNU offices, the Free Software Foundation offices, although I'm not sure it was even called Free Software Foundation yet, although it might have been. And Richard Stallman was there, of course. They were planning to go to dinner. We were out by the elevators of Tech Square, which is the building that MIT had offices in, where the squatters at the GNU Foundation were squatting. They were given the stuff. It's just funnier to talk about it that way. And we were getting ready to go to dinner, and there was some argument about dinner. And Mr. Stallman, then I believe in his mid-30s, if memory serves, threw a temper tantrum. Brilliant, brilliant software engineer, great visionary, right? Was it the MacArthur Genius Award winner, right? He's won a bunch of this sort of stuff. Very interesting guy. Totally 3 years old, throwing a temper tantrum over dinner. Which, let's face it, if he said, we're going here, everybody would have said, absolutely, sir, because whether they were formal or not, they all followed him. He was the guy leading the GNU lab, so they were all under his direction one way or another, whether he wanted to admit it or not. Total meltdown. Have not seen anything that bad since. No control over his emotions. You wouldn't know it. Here he is programming Emacs, which is an amazing feat, although more of an operating system without a kernel than an editor. But that's for my personal channel. Maybe I'll do a Vim Emacs rant on the other channel now that I've been inspired by my own memories. And the thing is, if you have no control over your emotions, you are your younger self. Like, what is what you are? Like, that's kind of defines what a 3-year-old is. or a 5-year-old is or a 10-year-old, right? You don't have control of your emotions. You're going to get trapped in that form of vision of yourself and not be able to get out of it. If you're stuck in the past, you're not mature or you're not maturing as much as you could. So, this idea of a past and whether or not and to what degree you are able to break free from it is wrapped up in our idea of maturity. And because you identify as your younger self, and I want you to think about this very carefully as you look around the world today. When you aren't mature, you over identify with youngsters, you over identify with children. You don't see why the treatment shouldn't be equal. After all, if you're not mature, you feel as though you are being oppressed just as your average 4-year-old is. This may help you to make sense of some of the craziness and obvious evil that you see in the world today. Over identification. And so this leads us to my best quick sort of one line definition of maturity. So, maturity is the ability to discern the boundary between inside and outside, not just of yourself, but also of yourself, right? So, where you end and other things begin, the differentiation of you and other things from the rest of the world. And this allows you, right? This differentiation, this understanding of the boundaries, of the lines, of the differences, allows you to leverage your emotion for yield. I'll explain that at the end. I'll explain this idea of leveraging your emotion for yield at the end. I apologize that I cannot explain it yet. Let's transition then to talking about what causes you to go through the process of maturity itself. What causes maturity? A constant exposure to the world while being protected from it until such time as you are ready to break away from that which sustains you. And that's a very complicated process. The fruit shouldn't drop too early, it won't ripen. The fruit shouldn't drop too late, it will rot on the vine. So we see the parallels in nature, which is 0% surprising given this word came from a natural science way of viewing the world. Now, that's not wrong, but it has implications when you're dealing with something as complicated as a person rather than a fruit. And this scientification of the world causing us to deal with these crazy words for no apparent good reason. But the concepts are still valid. And maybe we're over conceptualizing them for sure. But that is a different live stream. So it's not simply that unripened fruit picked too early, and it's not overly shielding the fruit from the sun or the wind or the rain. It's exposure to the world, but careful exposure to the world with nurturing is what ripens. That's what matters with respect to maturity. You have to be careful about maturing something, whether it be a plant or a person. You can't protect them from all the ills until finally they have to leave the nest because then they're completely unprepared. The helicopter parenting or the bulldozer parenting or whatever you want to call it is a real phenomena that we really see. But what does all this mean for people? Children, of course, specifically, but those overgrown children who are now much older than they should be, we'll say physically, but yet still not quite ripe or ready for the world, ready to face the world as it is. How do we define maturity with respect to persons? You mature as the result of gaining context outside of your parents, outside of the environment you grew up in, right? Outside of your fantasy world. This is why video games are poison. The more video games you play, the less mature you'll be. That's why people play lots of video games, tend to not socialize well. It's not that hard. The correlation is there because it's a causation. Sorry, do the two feed on one another? Yeah, perhaps. Who cares? There's a definite causation. It's not the only cause, but it's definitely there. And if something's reciprocal or whatever nonsense word you want to use, the problem quickly becomes, yeah, so what? The solution's the same. Stop doing it. Why do we care if it's reciprocal or virtuous cycle or whatever? You still have to stop. It doesn't make any sense to care where it came from. You mature as a result of interactions with other people, with nature herself, with trying to do things in the world, in other words, being an agent in the world that changes the world. When you're a baby, you can't really do much. You can cry. Hopefully, you get fed or changed or whatever. And then eventually, you get to put the food to your own mouth and eat at a pace that you think suits you. So you usually be wrong because you're a baby and babies are morons. You're a small child. Suddenly you can get your own cookies. But you have to be constrained from getting cookies all the time, right? This is part of the process of maturing. So you can do things in the world, and trying to do those things and getting spanked when you do them wrong is part of maturing. You mature as the result of solving problems on your own with supervision, but not too much interference, not zero interference, right? But increasingly less interference over time. And that makes it a long, slow process. And in the age of everything moving way too freaking fast, oh my goodness, nobody has any sense of time anymore. We lost that. But time is part of maturation, whether you're talking about plants or persons. We have flattened, compressed time down to nearly nothing at all, which causes universalism. Imagine the level of stupidity one must have to think that, oh, we'll just set up a network. And then every time somebody bad on the network does something bad, we'll report it and then no one will do business with them. Are you not accounting for starting conditions and the fact that people change, you moron? It doesn't get rid of crime at all any better than any other system does. And yet you think you have some grand new idea. No, you just live in a flat time world where no one ever changes. And just because things, quote, move quicker doesn't mean that they move throughout a large body any quicker than they would using any other communication mechanism. Reliance on the direct communication from others is not better because it takes you away from relying on the intuition that you have for yourself. That may seem good when intuition goes horribly wrong and you get the Salem witch trials. I get that. But also, Salem witch trials pretty rare. And these other systems are terrible by comparison. Interacting with your past specifically in a new way is part of maturity. Learning how your past had more depth than you realize, maybe even than you realize now. Oh, when I was young, my parents were yelling at each other about this thing. And then it just turned out, yeah, but that wasn't what you thought because you were 6 years old and you didn't know anything. Right. Jordan Peterson kind of goes over this, right? How you can fix your world or move past a problem by adding information and context. And a lot of times that has to be done from the outside. This is what people are missing. I do not give self help advice. That's insane. You cannot help yourself. You wouldn't be in the bad situation to begin with if you could. Don't be a moron. Talks about this woman who thought that her brother had sexually abused her, and he listens to the story and he thinks, "Oh no, this is pretty bad." And then he thinks to ask her how old she was, and it turns out they were children, and she was assigning knowledgeable, malicious intent to her brother that couldn't have been there because he was too young to have such a thing. And then her whole world fixes itself. She matured as a result of a new relationship with her past, understanding her past with a different depth that she hadn't previously had. So, being in a place where people care about you and know your past is important, or at least being around a few people who understand your past because they were there and can recontextualize it with you is important. And relying only on people you know is probably not the best strategy either, although better than the alternative, right? You don't want to have it the other way around. And that's hard to do if you are away from home. But this process of encountering your past from different perspectives from other people helps you place yourself in the world. It helps you to ground yourself to what you were, and that gives you a sense for how you've changed. And that change is a type of maturity, hopefully positive maturity. And it's impossible to do that well alone. Impossible. Now, this isn't to say that moving from home, away from home, isn't important, right? Of course, it is. You have to do it at some point. Uh, and some people never leave home and they get trapped in their past, trapped by the society that they're in, by the community that they're in, by an image of themselves imposed by their past. But that is less common, but it certainly happens. Um, there's this trope is everywhere, right? You leave the small town, it's in songs, it's in movies, it's all over the place. But that's actually pretty rare. But to be fair, sometimes the only way for people to grow up is to leave home, at least to some degree. And for some people, it's moved completely away. And that is certainly a thing that can happen where that is the best answer. It's just not usually the best answer. And college tends to be the stepping stone for things like this. But if you're maturing in college, it's too late. Now, that's not to say that you don't mature when you're in college, no matter where you're at. But if you're doing your primary maturing in college, you're kind of screwed. You should be well able to sleep at your friend's house long before college, right? Spend a week away at camp or whatever it is. And there are far too many people who will say, we're not in that state for whatever reason. The thing about maturity, like as such, we'll say, is it gives you a sense for public versus private. You have a personal private perspective. This is related to Paul Vanderklay's very interesting idea of secret sacred self. Unfortunately, his idea is not complete. The personal private perspective is what individualists rely on and believe is primary in the world, which of course it is not. That's kind of stupid, kind of really stupid. And it forces that way of thinking about it, of secret sacred self, forces you to not recognize that you're preferring a personal private perspective over the fact that you're a tiny little bug in the world and no one cares. No one cares. But this lack of maturity, you can see it when people don't understand what they're sort of admitting to in public. And there's a lot of, haha YouTube videos, or somebody says something that is pretty bad, right? It's a pretty bad admission overall. And they have no problem saying it. And in fact, when they're confronted, they don't understand why this is a problem. Well, there's a whole, not all of those things, but there's a whole class of those things that mature people would never talk about in public. Like the subject wouldn't, they just wouldn't broach the subject. A mature person knows what is supposed to be public and what is supposed to be private. What are you willing to admit in public? What are you willing to discuss in public? What size audience? What kind of audience? What's the quality of the audience? I say very different things on my Discord server to my friends who I've known for a while than I would say on my YouTube channel in general. Most of that, though, to be fair, is just brevity. Like, I need to be able to talk quickly to work through my ideas so that I can expand upon them in the notes to give you live streams and regular videos. That's just the way it is. So I'll take lots of shortcuts and do lots of broad brush strokes because I got to get through this topic and I got to hear people's ideas. And every once in a while they get caught up on, well, you said everybody and it can't be everybody. And I'm like, oh my God, yes, I know. Everybody knows. Calm down, right? That happens. But also it's still quicker though. But how you present should matter based on the audience. If you want to think about this in John Vervaeke's Age and Arena Relationships thing, I guess you can. It's not bad. It's just sort of lame. Might be the best you can do. That's fine. If that's the best you can do, boy, then it's the best you can do. Go for it. Maturity gives you a sense of inside and outside and what is the appropriate domain for the thing you're saying. Is it inside? Is it outside? Is it an audience of family? Is it an audience of friends? Because those can be two different things already. Is it my close friends, or is it really anybody that has interacted with me more than 10 minutes? Because it's all different. But you don't have that sense if you're not mature. And people that make that mistake, they're not mature. It's that simple. And which thing belongs where? Does it belong personal? Does it belong more public? Right? And why? Why should this not be made public? Or why should this not be kept to myself? Both of those are possibilities. And when to cross that boundary. Intimacy crisis, anyone? This is the intimacy crisis. It's right here. It's in the lack of maturity. When you're not mature, you can't make quality relationships with yourself, with others, and with nature, much less with the ineffable creator of the universe. If you want to go with 4 frames, I have a video on 3 frames. You can always add the 4th. I don't care. Doesn't make any difference. Doesn't change anything, actually. It may change you, but I don't. Not interested. Broad audience. I don't know you. Sorry. If I do know you, I'm not talking to you, because I'm talking to lots of people. It's a big difference. I have to say different things. If I'm talking to you personally on my Discord server, believe me, you're hearing very different things. You're hearing specific implementations of what I'm talking about and not broad brushstrokes designed to appeal to a larger audience. So I don't need to appeal to a larger audience when I don't have one. See how that works? It's magic. And the problem of no maturity, because let's face it, 3-year-olds are rabid, obnoxious, little individualist terrorists. They terrorize the world with their me, me, me. And that's what they are. But individualism requires a perfect memory. And it requires you to bring your own relevance. But it cannot. And I think that's why guys like John Vervaeke use this relevance realization talk. Now, look, I'm a fan of relevance realization, right? I just think it's undefinable, certainly by Dr. Vervaeke, but it is a way out of the trap of individualism because what is the process of realization? Oh, we have no idea. They never define it, right? And oh, what should I realize? Right. But what's wrapped up in that is the problem of attention, as Jonathan Bijot likes to talk about it. And what's wrapped up in that is the problem of prioritization. Why should thing A be more right? So now we've got judgment right there. So relevance realization leads to the idea of judgment and how you do that and why you do that and what that means, right? And that, of course, brings you one step higher to, well, virtues and values ultimately. The wisdom game is coming soon, by the way. We are in beta test on the electronic version, which will probably not be released, but maybe I'll release it. We'll see. That's just for testing, so we get the board game part right. Maturity, however, is all about how you integrate into the world, right? How you orient in the world with respect to the world and with respect to yourself. How you live within the world, participate in the world, cooperate with yourself, with others, and with nature. That is how you fight domicide. People who are immature have domicide. Why? Because they're 3 years old and mommy ain't around. Problem solved. Or they're 3 years old and mommy is around, but they don't want to be 3 years old anymore. So they think because they're 30, that mommy shouldn't be around. And now they're just resentful because they can't do without mommy or daddy or both. Doesn't matter. You get the point, I think. So, how does this relate to emotional yield? What is emotional yield anyhow? Where did you come up with this, Mark? Well, it's Sally's fault. Of course, it's Sally's fault. Should have known that by now. Control of your emotions is how you are able to keep your body and your mind together, to sync them up, to get them to cooperate. And you cannot do without your emotions, so you shouldn't even try, right? You shouldn't have this flat world version of stoicism, which means just deny all emotions and do the thing. Like that doesn't even work, and it's silly. And no, it's not what the Stoics did. So don't do that. But you do need to manage your emotions properly. They have to have a place within your body so they're not forcing you to throw a physical temper tantrum like Richard Stallman did. And probably still does, to be honest. The last time I saw him, it was rather interesting how little he had matured. I like Richard. I worked for Richard for a brief time. But also, my goodness, what a mess. You need to put the energy and drive or focus, maybe both, that your emotions provide to good use, to get things done in the world, to be an agent, to grow your body, to control your body, for your relationships with yourself, with nature, and with others. You need your emotions for a cohesive worldview. You can't have a cohesive worldview without your emotions. If every time you think about the federal government, you get angry, you're not going to cooperate well with the federal government. And if you don't cooperate well with them, they're not going to be able to cooperate well with you. So you're going to be creating what we call a self-fulfilling prophecy of the federal government being mean to you. Well, actually, you're kind of mean to the federal government and they're retaliating. So don't do that. They're bigger than you, moron. It's not that hard. So if your emotions aren't in control, aren't in check, aren't being accounted for correctly, aren't being put to good use, but are controlling your body or controlling your agency in other ways, you're not going to have a cohesive worldview. You're going to be fighting the world all the time. You're going to run into that cynical skepticism that I talked about in another video. So yield is what results. It's the product. It's produce. It's what's produced. It's what's happened when you have proper maturity. Things are properly mature, they become produce, and now they can be used. The product of your proper care for yourself in the context of others, of nature, and of your own body. That's what happens when you have proper maturity. You have a product of that care for yourself, of that care for your relationship to your body, of that care for the relationship with others, of that care for the relationship with nature. You need that. Your emotions, uncontrolled, will disrupt one or more of those relationships. They will destroy the care and turn it into anger or resentment or rage. I don't have anger at all, actually. Anger is nothing. If you have anger, you're weak. I have rage. Good stuff. If you cannot control your emotions, then you won't be able to go to the gym. You won't be able to hold a job. You won't be able to improve your life. You won't be able to learn anything. And even your body requires your emotions to function and improve. The number one indicator of whether or not you come out of surgery with no complications is whether or not you have confidence in your doctor. Sounds emotional to me. You need your emotions to function. And if they are out of control, you are immature and you cannot function well. So, your emotional yield, since your emotions drive your behavior and drive your body, although, again, if they don't drive it well, right, your emotions are the thing that give you the product of your efforts. They are the driving force. That is emotional yield. And that is the importance of maturity. So, what do we do with all of this that I just dumped on you that hopefully you took notes for? If not, you're going to have to listen again and take notes. Listen 100 times. I need the views. But take notes. Where does it leave us? The question that this leaves us with is, how am I not as mature as I should be? And don't ask that question only of yourself, only to yourself. Don't do this alone. Ask other people to help. What things could I improve on? How is it that you view me as immature? And if you find somebody who says, no, I think you're more mature than I am, ask somebody who doesn't say that. And take a note of who says that. Not saying it's a bad thing, but it's a thing. Good to know. Where can you improve, particularly on your emotional control? Jordan Peterson loved these stories about his son who apparently had emotional control problems. And he'd just tell him, go sit over there until you can behave. And you'd see him, according to Dr. Peterson, you'd see him himself, right? Trying to will himself, control himself physically, keep in the emotions. And he learned to do it. That was a process of maturity. Where is it that you need to get better? Because the ultimate question, at the end of the day, is what would make you be better? What would make you a better person? And you may say, Mark, why are you asking such a silly question? I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why, because the world needs you to be better. If the world's going to get better, you need to get better. You need to continue to mature.